All right, I'm going to talk about this one pretty quickly because there's really not too much for me to say, especially since I haven't played this game in a few months. Anno Mutationem, or Mutationem, I'm not really sure how to pronounce that, Mutationem. It's kind of a weird phrase there, but just Anno, we'll call it. I'd say this is a 6 out of 10 game, despite how beautiful it looks. I know some of you are going to be looking at this right now and thinking to yourself, how could you call this a 6 out of 10? I mean, look at this. It looks gorgeous. And it is gorgeous. It is a beautiful looking game. It has a lot of character. It's oozing personality. There's a lot of attention to detail. You can change your outfits. You can do little things in your areas that kind of change the atmosphere of them. It's hard not to say that this doesn't look like a really pretty game, because it does look great. There's cool designs of clothes that look kind of, somewhat futuristic, somewhat old school, depending on which outfits you pick. You can completely change your hair, and that all sounds really interesting until you realize when you go into combat, you always wear the same combat suit. At least when I played, that was the case, which is a cool look. It fits the world, but it does sort of limit the feel of things. You can do things like check your mail. There's new weapons, apparently, probably from updates that came since I last stopped playing. You can take a shower, and they show you some pixelated things. Everything is a really beautiful pixel style when it comes to characters, and the world's a nice 3D with an atmosphere that's really sold to you. The dialogue is voiced pretty well when it is voiced, which is pretty often. The game is completable in about 23 hours. That's about as long as it took me, and I tried to do most of the side quests. And I definitely putzed around a little bit here and there. Really pretty game. This city section, there's a few cities you can go to. Most of them aren't as big as you might hope. They seem huge when you're first looking at them, but not a lot goes on in each of them. There's, some fetch quests, your standard affair, but it's nothing you haven't seen before. There are nice touches, like the boxes moving when you run into them, and there's like little areas you can go into, different characters you can talk to, which, again, they aren't all voiced. There's advertisements that go in the back. They give you this really strong cyberpunk feel. The world is cool. If I stand here in the middle of the road, cars that should run into me will stop the second they are supposed to, which feels like a futuristic, change in this world, see? And that's kind of cool. I like that. And they honk at you, and there's people walking around. The world does feel really beautiful. It feels alive. It feels like, who knows what kind of story could go on here. Am I going to be beating on hoodlums and thugs? Am I going to be saving someone? Well, yeah, at first it seems like you're going to be saving your brother. And you have some kind of weird virus or some kind of sickness, and you think, oh, I wonder where this is going. And I definitely did not expect it to go the route it did. And unfortunately, I don't mean that in a great way. I feel like this game tries to do too many things all at once. It's as wide as the sea, but as deep as a puddle. It has all these ideas that kind of come together and look really cool. You can select different weapons. You can upgrade them. You can buy different ones. You can slot in like microchips into them to change their functionality. You get talent points. You can raise attributes to those. You have items that you can use, like grenades and healing and corn juice for some reason. You get junk items as you go through the world that you can sell to get some money back. There's all these kinds of things going on. You follow some bounties. You get to do a few things. The problem is that by the end of the game, you're not in these fun areas that look beautiful and are really interesting and full of interesting characters. I'm using the word interesting a lot, but I think you know what I mean. They're not as varied as they could be. Instead, you end up in very samey feeling sewers or facilities, areas where you can fight weird bugs that have mutated in the sewer, or where you fight this weird foundation, which is basically, the SCP Foundation. Because it turns out you're actually connected to them in some way. Oh, and here's some of the dialogue examples as you move through the game.
They found a way to bypass it like it's nothing.
What should we do? Can they track your location?
Don't worry, darling. I'm super hacker INA. I can deal with this.
INA and Anne, the two kind of, I would say, main characters, are fun enough to listen to, but I can't say they ever get enough time to really develop into something bigger. I really do feel like they could have had an awesome connection. They could have been a really fun duo to sort of understand. But both of them kind of just stick to their sort of one-note stereotype, and they never really graduate past that, which is unfortunate. The game, when you're actually in the combat areas where it's 2D, not the 3D ones, no, you'll never really do combat in this sort of section where you can move in the 3 dimensions. It plays fairly well, and it plays exactly how you would kind of expect. You have a double jump, you have a dash, you could double jump and dash, you have a guard that gives you a parry in the first few seconds, you have basic weapon combos you can do, like your aerial strike that leads you into the air, where you can do an air combo. You can combine between hits, so you can have a heavier offhand weapon, which I have here. You can charge up your attacks. There's some more complicated attacks that you can do, like the one I just did there. I'll kind of execute it here, which they're kind of helpful. This is a little bit further in the game, of course. I have all the talents at this point. You even get a cool dual blades thing, so if you choose, you can do the dual blades weapon. Which its thing is that it can switch between dual blades and single blades, and you can get this cool single, like Darth Maul-esque thing. But I never found it to be too helpful to do that. It has that cool toss, but you're kind of unable to really capitalize on it enough to really make me happy about it. This one you kind of can, like, you can kind of do this, toss it, and then do a combo, but it's rare to really get much use out of that, so I stuck with a single blade. It was just a little more useful. They might have changed the balance on it. You have ranged weapons, so you can switch between a few different types. This one just auto tracks enemies, as you can kind of probably tell from the missiles and the way they launch out. There are certain obstacles that might require you to come back later, like this thing that I can grapple onto. Earlier in the game, you wouldn't be able to grapple onto those. You'd have to wait till you get the power up to be able to like attach these light-based surfaces. Overall, it's okay. It's fun enough, but the problem is a lot of the combat is over and done with pretty quickly. If you know how to counter, you can just completely clown a lot of the bosses, which is really unfortunate. And the overall story just kind of eventually falls apart on you. It's not like it's terrible. It's serviceable, and for 23 hours, you're not going to be super upset or super bored or anything, but I do feel like it could be a lot better. I think what they had initially was a really fun world, and somewhere along the line, they kind of lost sight of that, which is really unfortunate because, again, the world looked beautiful, but, playing around in caves and things like that, it really underuses the setting. And that's not so bad if it was just like one level, but you never quite get into like the meat of this. You feel like you're about to get to something interesting, and then boom, you're near the end of the game, and you're in this really long end game where you're fighting the not SCP Foundation, and all the lore is getting all sorts of crazy on you. Like, everyone's doing crazy things. It turns out you have this special power where you're like able to turn into this monster ninja form, which can go super fast and is pretty cool. I wish I could use this form more, or use that as a skin, because she looks pretty neat. But you only have that for a limited time, so it never feels like it really leads to anything really super worthwhile. Now, again, it's been a few months since I have played this, so I'm sure there's things that I'm forgetting. But unfortunately, in those months, the story really just wasn't captivating for me. It didn't stick in my mind. It wasn't good enough for me to really be like, oh, this is incredible. I have to keep playing it, or I have to look back at it, or I have to support this. And you can see, like, there's some cool ideas. It's not like it's bad. They do a good job of using their worlds. There's interesting things. There is lore, there is background, there's huge maps. It's very much okay, but it's disappointingly okay. I think the best thing that really kept me going was the graphical style and the general atmosphere. But the storyline, the characters that just didn't develop enough or were only introduced for short periods, really ended up damaging my enjoyment of this game. I think if they had focused a bit more on the world they built up and on the characters they had, as opposed to kind of rushing this SCP-esque story, they might have had something incredible on their hands. That said, they could still do something wonderful with this. If they ever do a sequel, and they follow up on the main characters, and they really develop on who they become, and they focus on life in the city, and maybe refine the combat a little bit, I think there could be something really good here. Their style is top-notch. The style alone is what got me to play, and if you watch this, maybe even that will get you to play and try it out, to see if I'm just, saying a bunch of nonsense about the Elite game. I think if you play it, though, it's just very forgettable. It doesn't capitalize on what it does best, because it's trying to do too many things at once. Overall, 6 out of 10. Buy it if it's on sale. I think $15 is roughly a fair price, though. You can usually find it around that. If it's like $5, that's a pretty good steal. It's a quick 23-hour game. You won't regret it, but you might not necessarily remember it. So that's my review. Thanks all.